Babylon, out in theaters, written and directed by Damien Chazelle, who previously made Whiplash, La La Land, and First Man. This one stars Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Diego Calva, Gene Smart, and Tobey Maguire. Apparently, Chazelle had the idea for this film before he even made La La Land, but was told by one of the producers at the time, no, you can't do this one yet. It's too big, it's too expensive, it's too ambitious. Make a smaller movie first, we'll see how that goes. But I like the idea of having music being such an integral part of the story, so maybe go for a musical. And thus La La Land was born, and with its success, a lot of goodwill towards Chazelle, who now had the budget and the power to make Babylon. It's an incredibly ambitious, epic, and expensive film, and it opened in the US already in December to extremely low viewership. Apparently, the combination of very long runtime, 3 hours 9 minutes, and promotional material which didn't really explain the plot very well, which, in my personal opinion, is a good thing. But it meant that not a lot of the general audiences were actually interested in seeing it, and that then kickstarted this spiral of dumb online takes. I've seen people say on the internet, "Oh, it didn't make any money at all, therefore it must be bad. Therefore, I'm not gonna go see it." And this spirals again and again, which is a shame because Babylon is a very, very good movie. It takes place over around a decade of time, starting in mid 1920s and going well into the 1930s, and puts us in Hollywood during its first great transitional period from silent movies to talkies. But at the same time, it delves into the sort of cultural shift at the time. The roaring 20s were filled with debauchery, crazy parties, and extreme decadence, in Los Angeles even more so than elsewhere. But around the same time as putting sound in movies, a cultural change came along, making the art form try to be more of an art form, try to be a sophisticated thing instead of a carnival trick. The industry become more proper and in line with the traditional values of America, even going as far as implementing the infamous Hays Code, which limited what could and could not be shown in movies for decades to come. Babylon shows us all of that and more by following several different characters whose paths sort of interject and intertwine over the years. Margot Robbie plays Nellie Laroy, an up-and-coming actress from Jersey, very foul-mouthed, no filter, very open about her sexual life and drugs and partying. Initially, quickly rises to stardom after all these qualities make her stand out from the crowd, make her noticed. But then they also bring trouble with the studio when she's starting to become more of a troublemaker than she's worth. Diego Calva plays Manny, a small-time fixer, a man who will take any task and just do it. And he's working for one of the Hollywood producers at the beginning of the film, but enamored by his first meeting with Nellie, he wants to get more in the film industry himself as well. And then Brad Pitt is Jack Conrad, a powerful star for whom the landscape changes overnight with the advent of sound films, as he suddenly begins to lose all relevance and has to deal with no longer being the hotshot who everybody loves. And then we have several other characters popping up around them here and there. So the film, thematically speaking, is very reminiscent of Singing in the Rain, and it even quotes and references this other movie directly. Only Babylon is much darker, much more adult. I mean, make no mistake, it's a very graphic film. There's a lot of nudity, sex, violence, drugs, alcohol, disgusting scenes involving vomit and other bodily fluids. It really goes hard in showing us all of the decadence of Hollywood at the time. But it's not just an R-rated Singing in the Rain either. It has elements of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, being a love letter to movie making and having the character of an aging actor dealing with the passing of his career, and having this idea of some characters being actually real people from history, others being inspired by real ones, and others just purely fictional. There are traces of Boogie Nights in it, in terms of the tone and the way that it sort of explores an industry as a whole, and also especially in the Tobey Maguire section of the film, where it really reminded me of one of the scenes from Boogie Nights. There are also elements which made me think of classic Scorsese films about gangsters, with the way that the characters experience this rise and fall in a truly epic fashion. There are moments in it which are laugh out loud hilarious, like the battle sequence filmed early on, or the scene where Margot Robbie's character is trying and failing to perform a scene with the microphones on a soundstage. But there are also quieter, more emotional moments. The end of the first meeting between Manny and Nellie with the sun rising above the Hollywood Hills, a beautiful scene. Brad Pitt's conversation with Gene Smart, and then his final scene in the film. Sidney Palmer, a black musician, being forced to put black paste on his skin to make it look darker in the stage lights so that he isn't mistaken for a white man in a black and white movie. The ending of the film, to an extent, because I did think it was a little bit cheesy, but I can't lie that there are some powerful emotions in it. And the thing that Chazelle seems to be so interested in ever since Whiplash, the question of whether doing or creating something grand is worth all the sacrifice on the way. In general, Babylon is very open about all the fucked up stuff that Hollywood did and still does. The way the business chews some people up and spits them out when they're no longer needed, the grueling work conditions of the crews and the extras, the fucked up debauchery enjoyed by the elites, the pressure put on the creatives, and sometimes the very real dangers of injury or even death that so many of the characters in the film seem to be unable to escape. I think there's a lot of subtlety underneath this seemingly crass, loud, and exuberant film. For instance, the character of Sidney Palmer, the black musician, initially seems to be a bit of a token, sidelined black character. He's always there to the side, popping up, playing his music, and then at one point he decides to get out and just be a musician outside of Hollywood. So it seems like, maybe he's just there to have a person of color in the cast. But then when his ending comes along, you realize, no, it's not the case at all. He's actually the smartest character of them all. He manages to see the writing on the wall and get out in time with his dignity and move on with his life, whereas all of the others are consumed to varying degrees by the dark side of this industry. Now, quickly about the technical side of things. The cinematography is fantastic, in particular the camera movements. Chazelle has always been good with that, and I sort of missed that aspect of his filmmaking in First Man, which was made mostly with shaky handheld cameras. Here, he's back with his signature cranes and dollies and smooth, fluid movements of the camera, and it's just breathtaking sometimes. The way he weaves between the characters and shoots the scenes in these long, unbroken takes, moving through the locations, going up and down and round and round, and he's able to show us so much in such an effortless way. It's just stunning. There's also great use of light and color, again, exactly like he did on his previous films like La La Land. Babylon is quite pretty just as well. The score, done by Chazelle's usual friend and collaborator Justin Hurwitz, is beautiful and full of life. I loved all of the jazz songs playing throughout. They really help set the tone and the pacing of the scenes, which in some sections needs to be very frantic and in the others quieter and calmer. And the music really does its thing to accentuate the tone of those sequences by being exactly fitting to them. And then there's the use of repeating themes, particularly the theme playing every single time Manny and Nellie meet at various points of the film. It's a beautiful and bittersweet piece of music, and it's just a great example of taking a very rudimentary cinematic tool, which is to have a theme of a character and play it every time they're on screen. And it seems to me like it isn't used to such an extent in modern cinema as it used to be some time ago, and seeing it here sort of brought back that association with older films. It's a great use of that technique. Performances are great across the board. Margot Robbie gives the role her all. Brad Pitt gives a surprisingly layered performance, and as much as his character seems one-dimensional in the early sections of the film, he really gives it a great depth as time goes on. I love Diego Calva as Manny. I think his eyes tell a story so many times during the film without the need for any dialogue at all. If I had any complaints whatsoever, it would be two minor things. One, yes, I do think that the movie is a bit too long. And as entertaining as it was, and as needed as this runtime is to explore such themes, such extensive themes to such a degree, I do think you could still cut about 15 minutes from it without too much harm to the story. And secondly, I did find the ending to be just a little on the nose. I think it teeters on that little thin line between great and cheesy, and it stumbles a little bit towards the cheesy when the montage plays towards the end. It's almost like Chazelle just couldn't help himself and went a step too far. But then after the montage is done, he brings us back to what really matters, to Manny himself for the final couple of shots, and so I sort of forgave him that. Overall, I had a blast. I think Babylon is fantastic. It's messy and chaotic in all the good ways. It's an epic film in the truest sense of the word, and there's humor, there's romance, there's tragedy, there's death, and just a great exploration of such a fascinating industry at such a fascinating time of its life. Great movie.